沉睡了不知多少个年头，我总不顾一切的来到这地方。
那个，这就是正门，在这儿你们到时候检票啥的见识啊。
Throughout the war, during the war, Japan acknowledged or realized or thought that the war is going to get to Asia and the war is going to get to Japan. As part of self-defense, right, it began to prepare. That prepared, they knew they have no power over countries like Russia, or USSR at the time, like the US. So they have to find different measures. There were technological measures, and there were chemical and biological weapons. And the guy who championed that endeavor was Shiro Ishii. So Shiro Ishii was a brilliant, that's what they say, a brilliant medical doctor. Right? So exactly like me and some other medical students here, he went to the best universities in Japan. All right? So he went to Kyoto University as a student, and then he graduated and moved to Tokyo to work there. And he was a physician scientist. Again, very common to Hong Kong and to other physicians nowadays. When he read the 1925 convention, instead of thinking, maybe we should not use toxins and asphyxiating agents, he decided, we should use them. That's a good idea. What he did was, after reading that, he went abroad to a bunch of countries, including the US, including Europe, including Germany, by the way, and he met with scientists and asked them, okay, tell me about your research. Your research using biological weapons, research using chemical weapons. Tell me what you are doing, show me what you are doing. And he learned from them, and he came back to Japan and wanted, and really pushed hard to develop technologies and develop the infrastructure to experiment with them and eventually develop them into offensive, but mostly offensive measures. Right? At first, actually nobody listened to him. The emperor didn't care, the government didn't care. But apparently he was told, he was charming, he was very assertive, and eventually the emperor agreed. And they developed this program. So this is called, or became to be called Unit731. They had different names, but it's called the Togo unit, it's called the Shiro unit, or it's called Unit731. And the Unit731 had or developed daughter units in various places, including in Korea, including in Singapore, by the way. Until now, there is one of the Singapore government buildings, Ministry of Health, that used to be the headquarters of the daughter unit of Unit7. Our daughter unit, by the way, was also in Haila. That's what we are going to Haila. The main headquarters, and this is why we're here, was here. We're in a place called Ping Fan. It's actually a bit farther away. We will go to Mao. We'll see the first headquarters, which in fact doesn't exist. And then they moved from Ping Fan to here. Well, what they did was they put a bunch of subjects and attached them to stakes, grounded in the ground, in the soil, right? And they just dropped bombs on them and saw the results. Okay, so what happened to those people? Obviously, they might be affected by the bombs, but they wanted to see if the bombs survive, if the people survive, and what happened to the bacteria. All right? And third, they actually went to villages and tried out in real time what happens, for instance, if you introduce candy with bacteria to the villagers. Or, and again, an image that you will see today, what happens if you go to a river and put some bacteria in the river, a river leading to a village. Okay, and by that infecting all the wells in the villages, right, and exposing people to these various bacteria. Now, in general, we don't have good numbers as far as I'm concerned as to how many people died. One number that I know is 500,000 of subjects that they killed, mostly Manchurian civilians, but again also POWs. Two differences between what the Japanese did and what the Nazis did. The Nazis, and again, the reason I'm comparing them is, as you heard yesterday, when we talk about research ethics, maybe you might know something about research ethics. We mostly hear about the Nazi experiments, right? One difference is the Nazis cared less about the science and more subjecting people or certain groups of people to suffering and pain, etc., arguably. The Japanese also, they were very cool, they were racist towards a lot of different people, but it seems they were more serious about the research. So they actually made sure that the subjects were healthy. They fed them well, whereas the Nazis didn't care. All right, so if you look at pictures of the Nazi camps, everybody looks terrible, right? Very thin, very ill. In the case of the Japanese experiments, well, you have very little pictures, by the way, but the subjects were healthy. Okay, they were well fed. And this leads to another difference, which is the Japanese were much more effective. The Japanese making their research, this entire project, disappear. So as the war was finishing, the Japanese destroyed, or really tried to destroy, all their camps and all their research. All right, so again, we'll see today at the museum, there is a section, there's the museum itself, and there's a section outside where everything is destroyed, all the infrastructure. And that's the Japanese. So they destroyed a lot of the infrastructure, and we will see their first headquarters, Zugma Fortress, is completely destroyed. There's nothing there. Nothing there. So that's a successful attempt of the Japanese to destroy their past, to disremember, to forget their past. And this is why this year, compared to last year, another theme for this course is the ethics of remembrance. Do we have an obligation, a duty, a moral duty to remember, and what that means? One of the greatest reasons to be ashamed of what happened in the aftermath of the war, basically nothing happened to those Japanese researchers. So, the US gets into the war because of Pearl Harbor. It fights against the Japanese, dropped a bunch of nuclear bombs, and the Japanese surrender. All right? Again, there is a huge difference between what happened in Japan and Nazi Germany. We might talk about it later. But there are 3 commissions of investigation by American researchers. All right. General MacArthur, so he was the head of the operation in the Pacific. In an internal memo, he admits that the Japanese research on humans, including, and they knew that, the Pentagon knew this, including American POWs, but to the public, General MacArthur said, oh, we know they experimented on animals, but we don't have any evidence of them experimenting on humans. Right? And that was an attempt, or used later, to basically give haven to the Japanese to the experimenters, to the researchers. Right? So, what happened, again, one reason why the Nazi experiments are famous compared to the Japanese, we have the Nuremberg trial, which was a huge political, legal, act, right, of putting the Nazi soldiers, Nazi commanders, and Nazi physicians to trial, right? That didn't happen in Japan. So the Americans were very keen not to prosecute, not to highlight what the Japanese did. They couldn't resist completely. So we had a few trials, and they became famous. We had the Russian trial of putting 13 Japanese researchers to trial and prosecuting them. All right, so that's famous, and we have documentation of that. We had some minor Chinese, I want to say 2 minor Chinese trials that you wouldn't hear much about, and I don't know if we have any documentation of that. And we had the Tokyo trial, but that was mostly because of the push by other governments, by the British, by the Australian government, not by the American government. And in fact, the American government really wanted to hide what was going on and the information. Okay? The Tokyo trial, and you will hear about it a bit today. It was a huge endeavor. Okay? A bunch of judges from various countries. It found so a lot of researchers were put on trial. It lasted for 2.5 years. The documentation was immense, something like 5,000 pages, the entire protocol of the trial. It found some people to be guilty, but even that, for most of them, the others too, they went to prison for a very short time, or nothing really happened. Nothing happened to the emperor of Japan. Nothing happened to Shiroishi. So he actually got haven in the US, went to the US, spent most of his life afterwards in the US, only coming back to Japan at old age. But he died of old age, and that's it. One of the aftermath, and I will just end here, one of the aftermath of or allegedly at least, that data coming from the researchers, stemming from resulting from the research by the Japanese, were potentially, arguably used later. Okay, so one big question in research ethics, well, May can tell us more about that, whether it's justified to use data that we gain from unethical research. Okay? For military, that's not something philosophers, ethicists talk about. For militaries, they don't care about it, right? So potentially, or maybe because of the data and the knowledge we gain from giving a haven to Japanese researchers, different countries used chemical and biological weapons in their war. So allegedly, and I don't know if you want to add on that, allegedly Americans used what they learned from Japanese experiments during the Korea War in the 50s, and the Israeli government used chemical and bacterial or biological weapons in Palestine in around 1947. All right? So there is a link between the use of chemical weapons and biological weapons today or in history with the Japanese experiments. All right? And this is just a bit to give you an intro to what you're going to do basically today and the entire week.